Hi, I'm Dr. Sukli Liu, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Southern California. Today, I'm going to talk about this proofreading checklist that my colleague, Dr. James Finley, who is also an associate professor at USC, and I created together for our trainees. And although it was created for our trainees, we really think it could be used by anyone who is a little bit new to the writing process, or even if you're not new. I often will go back to this too when I'm writing papers. So the overall goal of this process was to help people think a little bit more critically about what they're writing and to provide some tangible guidelines for how to assess and evaluate their own work, as well as how to assess and evaluate other people's work. So a lot of times what we see when people are writing things for the first time is they're writing to the best of their ability, but they don't really always know, like, how is someone else going to read this, like a reviewer or something like that. So the point of this checklist is to help people really think critically about what they're writing and how they're writing. The way that we intended for this to be used is whenever somebody is writing something in our lab, whether it's an abstract for a conference or it's a full manuscript. A lot of times for our trainees, the first time they're writing a paper, it's a huge daunting task. So we have them go through this checklist as they're writing and try to fill it out after they're done writing whatever it is. When they think like, okay, this is good, then they should go through it. Then they send both whatever they've written, whether it's an abstract or a manuscript. For simplicity in this video, I'll just refer to manuscripts and say, let's just pretend everyone's filling out manuscripts or writing manuscripts. They send their paper plus this checklist to a peer reviewer. So that would be somebody either in the lab or in an adjacent lab that has some expertise in this area. And they just ask them, hey, do you mind reading my paper and filling out this checklist? I've already filled out the checklist so you can get an idea of what I was thinking. And that way, the other person then reads their paper and fills out the worksheet and makes any changes, on the document and track changes. Then the original author can see kind of how somebody else, but a peer, reads and evaluates their paper, can make any changes as needed, and then sends the final revised document plus the checklist. And the checklist can also be revised once they've made some corrections to the PI for a next review or next round of review. But we found this to be really helpful because it helps both the author to understand kind of what people are going to be looking for when they're reading the paper. It also helps whoever is proofreading it for them, gives them the experience of evaluating someone else's paper, which in turn ends up usually improving their own writing. And then when we get it, it also helps us because we know then kind of like what the author thought that the main point of this paper should be, what they're trying to get across. And then also if they think there are any gaps or areas where they want us to help finesse or pay attention to. Okay, so with that preamble, I will go through the checklist now with you. So it is about a page and a half. And I also have some other tips about writing that I've put at the end that could also hopefully just be helpful if you're getting stuck because, writing is a long, tedious, journey for a lot of people. It can be really intimidating. And so the goal of all of this is to hopefully break it down a little and make it more approachable. All right, so let me zoom in here. So this checklist, this again has the goal and then how to use it or how we intended it for to be used. You, of course, are welcome to use it however you would like. But so we have people write their name and then your name if you're not the author or even if you are. This is like if you're the proofreader and then the date of proofreading. So whoever's filling it out should write what they think the main point of the work is in one sentence. And a lot of times we find this to be really helpful because when writing a paper, there's so many details you want to convey. But at least by putting the main point of the work, it kind of helps to streamline like, okay, this is what everything should tie back to. As the author or as the reviewer, it's also nice to know kind of what do you think the best part of this work is? Like, what's the most impressive part? What are you the most proud of? Is it a figure? Is it the introduction? Is it the way that you tied things together at the end? Is it that you feel like you followed a really logical argument and flow? We'd like to know from you what you think the best part is. Then there's this question, which is there are gaps in logical flow in the following areas. The reason we added this is a lot of times we found that when people are writing and when we write too, we kind of know where the weak points are and we don't know how to fix it and we don't know how to move forward. So rather than like put it off for weeks and weeks and weeks, you can give somebody else the paper, even though it's not perfect, and just say like, hey, I know there's, this area needs work. And that's really helpful. Sometimes we just have people highlight the areas that they're not so sure about in the paper, because then we can come back as the PIs and help to try to fix those areas or focus on them. But at least we know that where kind of some of the weaknesses are. And then this is also, also the work could be improved in the following ways. So what do you think also needs to be done? Like if you were to take a critical eye to your own work, where could it be improved? And then, like I said, are the areas that the author knows can be improved or need to be improved, are they highlighted? So yes. And then any other comments that you may have. So that's kind of like the quick overview and summary. That way, when we get this, we have a pretty clear idea of where the paper is headed, what the goals are, etc. Okay. And then these are the actual checklist items. You can check them if you'd like, but we go from like big picture to section level to paragraph level to sentence level, and then even to word level. So big picture, do you have a clearly identified audience? And this typically means like, do you know what journal you're planning to submit to, or what conference you're going to? You should know kind of which things do you need to explain to this audience and which things do you not need to explain. Then have you clearly identified the main point in the paper, hopefully somewhere soon? The first sentence should clearly frame the study within the context of the research area, or at least bring in the reader to that idea. There should be a clear outline for each section and for the paper throughout. And that's actually where I like to start for these types of things, is with an outline. Ideas should be presented in a logical order, and that order should be maintained throughout all sections. So you have the ideas that come in the introduction, then in the methods, you present, in the same order, kind of the different methods that you use to answer those questions. The results follow the same order and the discussion follows the same order. This may sound very uptight, but when people are reading your paper quickly, once it's published, it will really help to get your message across. And that's in the end, the goal of writing, right? Is for people to know and understand new ideas that you're presenting to them. So how can we make it as easy as possible? When you have the hypothesis or any hypothesis you put out, you should also have a rationale for it. So you can't just say we hypothesized X and Y, but we hypothesized X and Y because of whatever else. And then areas that need to improve are highlighted. This is big for us because, like I said, it's really helpful to know up front where things need to be improved. At the section level, and keep in mind too that James and I put these things in because these are common areas where we see people struggle. And this was common feedback that we were giving to trainees often and over again. So that's why I put it into this checklist. But we should be able to understand the main points of each paragraph by reading just the first and the last sentence. So this basically should be your outline. The first sentence should introduce what this paragraph is going to be about. The last sentence should maybe conclude the paragraph, like a quick summary of the paragraph, and then give you a bridge into the next paragraph. Section headers, I like section headers to be specific. So instead of saying brain volumes and associations with behavior, you could have something that actually tells you what you're about to read, which is smaller brain volumes are associated with worse behavior. That said, I know different journals have different styles about this, but personally, I like to be as concise as possible, as much as possible. At the paragraph level, each paragraph, like I said, should have a topic sentence. The content in each paragraph should relate to the paragraph's topic sentence. Each sentence includes a concept from the previous sentence. So like a sentence shouldn't come out of nowhere. And then the final sentence sets up the subsequent paragraph. At the sentence level, any statements of fact should be supported by citations. Sometimes when you're writing quickly, you're just trying to get the ideas out, you write, and then you can just put a comment like citation or put in parentheses citation. If I were you, I would do whatever it is the same way each time so that you can do a search at the end when you're done writing and like just find all the like parentheses CIT or parentheses citation, whatever you chose to use to remind yourself to go back and add citations, and you can clean those out. But all statements should be supported by citations. You should eliminate empty phrases. So a lot of times people write, many studies have shown, blah, blah, blah. It is well known that, blah, blah. You can just start with whatever the fact is. No sentences should begin with prepositions. So to determine if, blah, blah, blah. You can replace vague terms like better, many, numerous. Like there are so many studies, or there are so many researchers who do X, Y, and Z. Try to be specific and use quantitative terms whenever possible. So there are more than 500 instead. Try to eliminate in order to. So these are just kind of like ways you can make your writing more concise. I will be the first to admit that these are hard for me because I was an English major in college and I like more flowy writing, but scientific writing is totally different. And so try to remove as much as you can and just be direct about what you're trying to say. So for instance, in a 1978 study from the University of California on honeybee migration, Smith et al. Showed, you can just say Smith et al. Showed that honeybee migration, whatever it is you're trying to say. So, and these are also important because a lot of times your journal articles will have word counts and you need to eliminate words anyways. So learning to do this from the get-go is a very helpful skill. Split sentences with multiple independent clauses into just multiple sentences. Did you run a grammar check for run-ons and incomplete sentences? These days with ChatGPT and other tools, there are a lot of ways to make sure that your writing has been finessed and is more streamlined. That said, I probably shouldn't have said ChatGPT because it is a hot topic right now. There is a lot of controversy about how it should be used in scientific writing. And I personally don't know that I know the best way for it to be used for scientific writing. You should always write your own words. I will say that. And I think so far, the best thing I've seen for ChatGPT is to use it to proofread for you, because it can proofread not only spelling and grammar, but also kind of like higher level things like the way, the flow of the paper. That said, it is an ongoing topic. So because this is being recorded, I don't want to say anything that's going to get me in trouble later. I don't know how we're going to use AI essentially for scientific writing. I think it's going to be an interesting evolution to see how things go. Okay, also make sure you're identifying and eliminating author-specific quirks. I have seen this so much, like I have my own quirks. There are certain words that I like to use. There are certain transitions that I like to use. Other people have their own transitions. So when you're writing, try to be aware of them. And when you're reviewing someone else's, you could also be aware and let the person know because they probably don't even realize they're doing it or using a certain word a lot. Wherever possible, replace vague details with directions or details. So instead of saying results showed changes in brain activity, you could say results showed increases in activity in X region after X process. Make sure you define all variables in your equations and make sure that tables or figures are referenced in the paper and consistently numbered. This is something you can do usually at the end to go back and just double check everything, but it's something that we always look for at the end. On the word level, make sure that any technical terms are clearly defined. Make sure you run spell check, that your spelling and capitalization is consistent and correct, and that abbreviations are defined once first and then used consistently thereafter. So that's the checklist in a nutshell. Hopefully this gives you some guidance on what to look for and what you're trying to achieve. Other tips that I included when writing. So like I said, writing is really hard and sometimes it feels like such a daunting process, especially if you're looking at a blank page. The hardest part about writing is knowing what you want to say. So essentially the thinking before writing. In this sense, I really, really recommend people to always write an outline. Because the outline can go through and it can be sentences in your outline of what each paragraph is going to be about. And it helps you to kind of chart out the logical flow. Other times, putting together an abstract or a poster can be really helpful because it helps you get all the ideas out there. This is usually great because it makes you analyze all your results and tell a story. And then once you've told that story to people like at a conference multiple times, and you've gotten feedback, then you kind of have a good idea of the shape that that story is going to take, and it will help you to be able to write the full paper. When people get stuck, I tell them usually try writing the methods first because it's just what you did. That's like a historical account, really. Not so simple, but it should be the easiest part to write because you know what you did and you can just write that down. Then you write the methods, which is just what you found. Then you go back to the introduction. So why did you do the study? What questions were you trying to answer? And then the discussion. And then you can fill in the tables and figures. And as you're writing, sometimes I'll put a placeholder when I think like, oh, this needs a table or this needs a figure to prove this point. You can also look at similar recent papers for a guide of what to include in the methods and results to get started. So like somebody does their first brain imaging study and they have no idea how to write it or what to include. I would say just find a recent good paper in a good journal that's similar to what you're trying to do, or usually actually in the same journal that you're trying to write, and look at the format. How did they structure the methods? How did they structure the results? And try to use a similar structure for yours, because that can just give you a guide of how to start. You can also, if you're feeling really stuck, try writing, even just set a goal of writing for 30 minutes or writing one paragraph. So oftentimes once you get started and you get into the flow, you can write a lot more than that, but at least you have a goal of just something that feels attainable. And then oftentimes writing with someone else or being accountable can be helpful. One thing that I've really liked is the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. It is an amazing resource. They have a free 14-day writing boot camp where every day it prompts you, it sends you an email to remind you that you need to be writing. And then you log in and it sets a timer to write for you for 30 minutes. And then you write kind of at the end of the day, like what you accomplished and what your goal is for the next day, which is honestly a great practice to get into. But it's a really nice platform and it's free. So I encourage everyone to check that out if that's something they feel they might need help with. Okay, so that's the video. I hope this was helpful. We're open to questions. We also anticipate that people will find new ways to use it and have differences of opinion about what they think should be included, or maybe they don't like some of the section or sentence or word level things that James and I have a preference for, and that's totally fine. I think the idea is make this your own, put in the things that you know that you want to be looking for. And it's just helpful to have something explicit as a guideline when you're writing. So hope that's helpful. Oops, I didn't mean to do that, but hope that's helpful. And hopefully we can talk about this more. Thanks.